The other day, I was inundated with requests to talk about the memo that got released that shows what happened with Donald Trump's surveillance, the FISA courts, and I was trying to better understand what exactly is going on. But you know what I found? The left is saying it's nothing. Nothing happened. It's all hype. It's a nothing burger. And many people on the right are saying this is the evidence we were looking for. That there is corruption within our politics, that there is corruption within the FBI, and this proves it. And I'm sitting here kind of in the middle trying to figure out exactly what the hell's going on. And the only thing I could think of is that we're going crazy. That the two universes that exist are getting so far from each other that you can't even objectively look at this memo and understand what the hell is actually happening, because both sides view the world so dramatically differently. So I started thinking, what makes the factions get further and further apart? What is causing the divide, and why is there this problem? The reality is, media companies, nonprofits, activist organizations, they're trying to survive. And as things actually kind of improve in the world, as violent crime goes down, as instances of racism actually start to become less frequent, these organizations need to prove that they have a reason to exist. They're feeding you a drug, trying to trigger some kind of response in your brain so that you give them attention or give them money. And as you grow a tolerance to the stories they're feeding you, to the narrative they're feeding you, they have to continually up the dosage. Eventually, at some point, that's going to result in an overdose, and this whole system will come crashing down. Today, I just want to talk about the escalation and the addiction that we face as a society as it pertains to politics. But before I do that, let me give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, all of you. If you haven't already, go to patreon.com/Timcast and become a patron today. There are several different tiers to choose from. Most notably is Tier 1. At $10 per month, you get access to behind-the-scenes photos and videos and special commentary videos that I make every so often. With your support, I can continue to do the work that I do, so please consider becoming a patron at whatever level you feel comfortable today. So I've given a lot of examples over the past year or so to people as to why things have gotten as crazy as they have. When Donald Trump was announcing that he was going to be running for the president, a lot of people had to decide whether or not he was a legitimate contender and if they needed to attack him politically in order to win. If you take a Google search from before Trump announced, you'll see there's very few stories, if any at all, talking about Trump potentially being racist. In fact, most of the stories actually talk about Donald Trump calling ABC's show Blackish racist. But certainly, doing a Google search for 1 year later, and you will see the news is inundated with Trump being racist. But you can see the top article is Donald Trump racist? Here's what the record shows. Certainly, there are reasons for people to think that Donald Trump is racist. I know a lot of Trump supporters might not agree with that, but Trump has certainly said things that are perceivably prejudicial. But does that mean he is actually racist? That's not what this video is about. This video is about the escalation. See, what happens first? A news organization hears the murmuring. Is Donald Trump racist? Some people say he is. So they write a story. Is Donald Trump racist? It's a fair question to ask of a lot of people. Sometimes it can be misleading because it can paint someone as racist even if they're not, but I understand why someone might ask and do a story about it, because for all you know, this article actually exonerates him. But we're not going to talk about the article, we're going to talk about the escalation. After people see that article, they click that link, it generates revenue for that media enterprise. Well, how do they get those people to click again? If they write the same story twice, a person's going to say, I read that last time, I'm not going to read that again, that's a boring story. Why would I read a story I already read? So what do? They up the dosage because they're a dealer. They're trying to trigger you emotionally. They're trying to trigger something in your brain to make you take action, to click that link, to read that story. General news doesn't really work. It's kind of boring. So what happens? Well, the next stories start to come out saying Trump is racist. Then after you've read that story, they say Trump is almost like Hitler. And now we're at the point where people are just saying Trump is literally or worse than Hitler, because they have to continue upping the dosage of the drug you are receiving. And I know I'm singling out media targeting Trump for this one, and that's simply because he is the president and he has the biggest target on his back. But certainly, everybody does this. There needs to be some kind of escalation, whether it's on the left or the right, because people grow tired, and the narrative starts to grow stale and boring. I worked for Fusion. It's called Fusion TV now on cable, and I think it still exists. And the digital website, fusion.net, has become Splinter. When I first started there, it wasn't actually a far-left website. In fact, in the office, on the walls, they had posters that said, "We will not be partisan," among other things. But something started to change. And I don't exactly know why. One of the ideas is that marketing consultants came in and convinced the higher-ups that young people were progressive and wanted social justice. But there was something else as well. Fusion made a video about trans rights very early on that did really, really well. In fact, it did better than anything they had made at that point. Their videos were getting a couple hundred views, maybe if they were lucky 1,000 views. But this one video broke over 100,000 views. And so the people working at this company said, that worked. It must be what millennials want. On the surface, I can understand why you'd make that distinction. You are targeting millennials, you made a piece of content about trans rights and young people, and it did well. But the reality is that video probably did well because the trans community is underserved and small. So when a video came out showing them information and depicting their community, it resonated really well with a certain group of people. It does not mean that the community at large, that millennials in general, were interested in this kind of narrative. So Fusion took the absolutely illogical approach of saying, let's double down on the far left progressive politics. And surprise, surprise, it didn't work. But they tried pushing further and further to try and figure out exactly what they could do to attract young people. And because the first video they did that was successful was about social justice and trans rights, that's the narrative they went with. To the point where I was told by the president of the company that millennials are progressive, so we want to side with the audience. And since then, Fusion has consistently hired and pushed out far left-leaning politics and articles. But Fusion's not the most egregious example. There's a much worse offender, and I hate to call people out specifically, but now I'm going to single out Vox.com. Adweek had a story from April 7th, 2014. Vox launches explainer news site. Understand the news one flashcard at a time. Vox, the news media enterprise formerly known as the ominous Project X, is finally here. The Ezra Klein-led venture officially launched late Sunday night, promising to give readers a better way to understand the news. Klein explained to the New York Times that his former employer, the Washington Post, lacked the technology to be able to bring stories to the next level. In his belief, the company was mired in the routine of reporting day-to-day events, which came through in its publishing platform. There was no way to update stories to reflect additional developments. The biggest source of waste is everything the journalist has written before today, Klein explained. Vox is attempting to change that by having updated stories that will be an authority for a certain subject. In addition to traditional news stories, the site is using so-called Vox cards, explainer slides that break down the difficult concepts into manageable chunks. This dissection of hot topics has already drawn comparisons to Wikipedia for the news community. Just about 4 years ago, people were comparing Vox.com to Wikipedia. And certainly you can still make some comparisons in some ways. You can always do that for everything. But Vox.com now just comes off like your traditional progressive digital media news outlet. And there's several examples of this. For instance, on November 13th, 2017, Vox ran a story, Reddit just banned one of its most toxic forums, but it won't touch the Donald. The pro-Trump forum is Reddit's hate-mongering shadow, but admins want to work with the community. In the story, they say, as Polygon recently pointed out, Reddit's new stricter content policies won't do much, if anything at all, to halt the violence and the hate speech in subforums like the Donald and r/Kotaku in action, a notorious Gamergate hub that also fuels alt-right rhetoric. The reason being that, well, Reddit administrators don't appear to see them as serious problems, despite routinely being handed evidence to the contrary. Both of those subreddits have rules about brigading and harassment, and it is against the rules. So Vox is singling out their political opposition, but why would an explainer news site have opposition in the first place? Because, well, Vox is no longer an explainer for the news, they're a partisan digital media outlet. And there are other examples. Liz Plank is by no means a non-partisan. The content she produces is overtly partisan. In fact, we can look at some examples from Vox.com. Meet the immigrant women fighting for their right to be treated fairly. Donald Trump won't apologize to women, so I did it for him. And down here we see, male congressman questions why men have to pay for prenatal care. Really? It's obvious who they're targeting. They're targeting the left. They are not explaining the news. They are pandering to a political faction to generate traffic. One of the biggest problems I have is that I tend to try and stick to my individual principles. Now, I don't think I'm perfect. I change. My views have probably changed. I think it would be insane to think I've been the same person over the past 10 years. But it also means that I don't care who you are or what group is supporting me at whatever time. If I think something's wrong, I'll say it. And one thing that has benefited me is that I mostly just want to be on the ground at these stories and experience them as they happen. And then when I'm in Ferguson, when I'm in Ukraine or Turkey, and the news lights up, the story explodes, people come to me and say, Tim, what's happening? But the people that come to these stories, the people that will watch Occupy Wall Street, will watch Ferguson, are of a certain political leaning. And when they watch, they assume that for whatever reason, because I'm giving them the news, I must support them too. Even after so many people on the right have supported me for giving them a fair shake, I still will never say that I support them or produce things specifically to pander to them. And although many people on the left might accuse me of doing that, the reality is you can look at the content I've made over the past several years and it's relatively static. I've always been more aligned with the hacker community than anything else, but even then I'm not really an official member of anything. It is very difficult to build an audience, to grow, and to run a business when you refuse to pander to a political faction. I've known this for a long time and I flat out refuse to do it. Certainly, the videos you'll see on my channel, they're actually a reflection of my values and the things that I believe in, and I try to be pretty straight-laced in most of the things I do. Vox took the other route. They initially tried doing explainer news, and in my opinion, I would assume that when they realized boring news doesn't sell and you don't get clicks and you're not going to make money and it's not sustainable, they switched, and now they're overtly on one side of the political divide. And to the point where they're actually questioning whether or not a subreddit dedicated to the President of the United States, a massive political forum, should be removed from Reddit, which would just be crazy. Because certainly 60 million or so people supported the president during the election, and he still has a decent amount of support, from some estimates ranging from 35 to 42%. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are right now, but that's a lot of people who still support the president, and that's a large community who uses this service. If there are a few people, if there's even a decent amount of them that are breaking the rules, then those individuals should be sanctioned. But removing the community is overtly partisan and it's rather extreme. So ultimately, I can't say where this will lead us, but it's an issue that I wanted to talk about. So I took this wonderful Saturday to do it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is there a right and wrong, or are we all just being force-fed these drugs? You can follow me at TimCast on Twitter for breaking news around the world and general commentary, I suppose. Tomorrow, I am putting up a video. I had a conversation with Brett Weinstein and Heather Hying. It's going to be great, so check that out tomorrow at 4. That's the Culture War podcast. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.